Causes and effects of World War I, World War II, the Cold War, and the Civil Rights Movement by me. So I'll just have the events up in the screen while showing the pictures and talking three main causes and three main effects about that event. Cause number one, militarism. European nations were building huge armies and stockpiling weapons. Everyone wanted to prove they were the strongest, and that tension made war feel almost unavoidable. Cause number two was alliances. Countries formed powerful groups, the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. If one country got into trouble, its allies were pulled into. It was like a giant domino setup waiting to fall. Cause number three is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. When he was killed in 1914, Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. One declaration of war led to another, and suddenly the whole continent was involved. Now the effects. Effect number one was the massive destruction and loss of life. Millions of soldiers and civilians were killed, and entire regions, especially in Europe, were left in ruins. Effect number two is the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was forced to accept blame, pay huge reparations, and give up territory. The treaty created anger and economic hardship that will shape the future. Political upheaval is a third effect. Old empires collapsed, new countries were created, and revolutions like the one in Russia reshaped global politics. World War III. Cause number one is the Treaty of Versailles. After World War I, Germany was left with harsh penalties, huge reparations, lost territory, and deep humiliation. These con this these conditions created anger and economic hardship that made extreme extremist ideas more appealing. The second cause is the rise of tota totalitarian leaders like Adolf Hitler in Germany, Benito Mussolini on Italy, and militarists in Japan promised to restore power and pride. Their aggressive expansion and disregard for diplomacy pushed the world towards conflict. The third cause is the appeasement and expansion. As Germany, Italy, and Japan took over neighboring regions, other nations tried to avoid war by giving in to their demands. Instead of preventing conflict, appeasement encouraged more aggression. Effect number one is the massive destruction and loss of life. World War II was the deadliest conflict in history. Cities were destroyed, millions of soldiers and civilians died, and entire regions were left in ruins. Effect number three is the creation of the United Nations. To prevent another global conflict, countries formed the UN in 1945. Its goal was to promote peace, cooperation, and human rights around the world. And the last effect is a new world order. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, leading to the Cold War. Meanwhile, many nations in Asia and Africa began fighting for independence, reshaping reshaping global politics. The Cold War. First cause being ideological differences. The United States believed in democracy and capitalism, while the Soviet Union promoted communism and a one-party state. These opposing worldviews created deep mistrust. Cause number three is power vacuums after World War II. Europe and parts of Asia were devastated as countries rebuilt. The US and the USSR competed for influence, each trying to shape the part or part were world in their own image, and the last cause being nuclear arms and military competition. Both superpowers raced to build more powerful weapons instead of calming tensions. This arms race made each side feel threatened and pushed them further apart. Now the effects. Global conflicts and proxy wars. Instead of fighting directly, the US and USSR supported opposing sides in places like Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. These wars caused massive destruction and long-lasting political divisions. The second effect being the formation of alliances. NATO and the Warsaw Pact emerged as military blocs. Countries aligned themselves with one superpower or the other, dividing the world into two competing camps. The last effect being the collapse of the Soviet Union. By 1991, economic struggles and political pressure led to the USSR's breakup. This added the Cold War and created new independent nations across Eastern Europe and Central Asia. The Civil Rights Movement. Cause number one being segregation and Jim Crow laws. Across the South, Black Americans were forced into separate schools, neighborhoods, and public spaces. These laws created deep inequality and daily injustice that people could no longer accept. Widespread discrimination and violence is the second cause. Black Americans forced unfair treatments in jobs, voting, housing, and the legal system. Acts of violence and intimidation made it clear that change was urgently needed. The third cause being growing activism and leadership. Organizations like the NASP or NAACP, along with leaders such as Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, inspired people to stand up, speak out, and demand equal rights. Now the effects. The first effect being major civil rights laws. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 outlawed segregation and promoted the right to vote, marking huge steps towards equality. The second effect being increased political and social participations. Black Americans gained greater access to voting, education, and public life. More voices were finally heard in governments and society. The last effect being a lasting push for equality. The movement inspired future efforts for justice, women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, disability rights, and more. Its impact continues to shape activism today.